When she started struggling with her mental health, what I did struggle with, all I was hearing was kids will be kids, teenagers will be teenagers, they'll outgrow it. That led me to want to just tell people more, about it. I went back to school, got my bachelor's degree in psychology, wanted to understand why her mental health treatment progressed the way it did. And I thought I would find some answers there. What I found ultimately was our behavioral health students, they don't talk about suicide. So you have a whole demographic of people that are behavioral health students, graduates, are going to ultimately help someday, and they're not getting any training on what suicide loss looks like.
Dear friends, welcome to Impromptu Stories. Today's conversation carries the weight of love, loss, and the kind of courage that comes only from surviving the unthinkable. Tracy lost her 16-year-old daughter to suicide. 18 years have passed, but the pain remains the same. It's raw, it's real, and it's part of her every day. In the silence that followed, Tracy found her voice, and today she's using it to advocate for those left behind after the suicide loss, the survivors whose stories are so often overlooked. She is now a coach, a speaker, and a fierce voice for post-vention support, working to bring light to the parts of grief that rarely see it. This episode is about speaking the unspeakable. It's about breaking the silence and bearing witness to what it means to live on with love, purpose, and pain woven together. Thank you. Last night I did listen a couple of your short episodes on your podcast, and I would say I'm really impressed. Thank you so much for sharing. I think you should continue those series, those 15 to 18 minutes series you do. They're really beautiful, and that gave me also a good idea about how can I actually share my experiences too. Some topics are very hard to talk, and I'm so happy to have you here. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It's been a journey. I'd say keep going with your podcast. Your message is important. It's about the message and who we're helping with that message. Pray and go. That's all you can do.
Our mission is to spread the information, share our experiences. I do believe that we're helping thousands and millions of people out there. Tracy, welcome to Impromptu Stories. Thank you so much for being here. This conversation is so close to my heart. I lost my brother as well. It's going to be 6 years in August. It's coming up. I feel it always gets raw for me and painful. I want to welcome you because this conversation is the light and truth you continue to offer to others. You lost your beautiful daughter Chelsea to suicide just at 16 years old. And while this pain will never truly, fully leave you, you've turned it into a purpose. You're using your voice to speak up for survivors, for grief, and for all the things we don't talk about enough. So that's why you are here and I'm here too for the same reason. I'm truly honored to share this space with you today. Welcome to the Impromptu Stories.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. I'm honored to be on here with you. Like you said, talking about this subject that's close to both of our hearts. It's been a journey. I mean, not as long for you, but I'm a good testimony to how you will survive this and you will move on to have better thoughts, not to be overwhelmed in the long term. We never forget them. Moving on probably wasn't the best choice of words. We don't move on. We learn a new way to accept the reality.
And to live with it, As I said recently in one of my posts, we learn how to grow around it, embrace it,
Right.
like as you said, accept it, in a way that it also brings purpose, sharing our experiences, because it's something unimaginable, like we never wanted to have this to happen to us, and we never wished to anybody to go through this, but if somebody is, because every day we know the statistics a little bit, right? So every day we lose somebody, many people actually. Before we talk about your advocacy work and your grief, let's just talk about your daughter a little bit, Chelsea. Who was she? What did she really love? And what made her light up, in every day? I've heard one of your stories about when you were watching a movie about snakes or something. It's very cute, very funny. I could imagine her being such a fun little girl. So maybe share about her.
Sure. She was I like to say she was spunky. She was very just full of life, kind of quirky, kind of just out there. She just just oozed personality. Anybody that ever met her didn't forget her, that's for sure. And yeah, she loved her pets. She was very artistic. She loved to draw. She talked about moving up in the fashion world one day. She wanted to design clothes. She loved music. She loved doing karaoke. And just, everybody just loved her. She would kind of take over a space, whatever space she walked into. She just kind of, glowed, I guess, for lack of a better word. Great story that I heard from her math teacher, her high school math, and he said that Chelsea used to come into class and bring in all of her makeup and lay it out on her desk, and then all the girls would clamor around her desk for makeup lessons, and he would have to stop her and remind her that, class was in session and this isn't the time. And she'd just be, oh, I'm sorry. Like she didn't know, or that she's there every day, right? But she was just so cute, you couldn't really, get mad at her. So she was very vibrant, until she started struggling with her mental health, and then it just got dark from there. And when I think of Chelsea, I like to remember those happy and fun personality things than, the later part where she went downhill.
I do really, I guess I can relate. It was 2018, end of May, when my brother phoned me, and he was in a very, very bad shape. He did complain about his depression growing since 2017, kind of thing, around that time. I took it seriously and I did support him as much as I could, but I'm so far away, right? So for a year, I helped him to stay alive, support him in my way, because family honestly didn't understand. It's a big stigma. I was really surprised when I heard in your podcast you shared about how stigma is huge here, right? I thought it's actually a little bit less stigma here than back in my country there, because it's mental health so much overlooked. My brother, I believe he struggled for about 10 years, I know for sure, but he was trying to just keep it strong, hold it together, because he's a man. He was expected to be, not to have weaknesses like that, not to talk about depression at all, not able to share about it at work, although he worked for oil and gas. They had medical insurance for him, he could have used therapy and stuff, but he was really scared he'll lose job, somebody find out will think he's weak, whatever, right? So how was it like for you? If you don't want to share, it's okay, we can always cut this off.
No, when she started struggling, with her mental health, I would say was probably within the year before she passed. Stigma, I don't know that we fought so much against stigma as far as her mental health, because, anybody I was around knew that securing her mental health was important. What I did struggle with, though, was the concept that all I was hearing was kids will be kids, teenagers will be teenagers, they'll outgrow it, they just want their peers to, accept them, and they want to fit in. And I, just as a mom, I knew something was off, something was wrong. And so I was reaching out for the resources that I knew existed where I was. And, I don't think they were taking it seriously, or they weren't taking it as seriously as I was taking it. And, in the end, here we are, right? But, she went from that vibrant personality to withdrawing inside of herself, to not wanting to get out of bed, not wanting to eat. And I think her lack of food certainly contributed to her mental health as well, because we know our stomach and our brains are really connected. And so I like to say it was the perfect storm, because all the things that could have worked against me did. In the end, she made a choice to leave, and we're left here to pick up the pieces and try to figure it out and try to understand. So I try to educate people that we can't just say, oh, kids will be kids and they'll outgrow it, and because they may not, they really may not.
Would you have, because we're on this topic, I have my own also teenager girls. My youngest is 15. We have different things that happen sometimes with her maybe not being happy how she performs in dance or friendships, right, in school. Would would you say like there are any signs we should be watching for besides them? Like, did she ever say she wants to take her life? Kind of?
Yeah, she had made an attempt about 6 months before she actually passed away. And I did not see that coming. I did not see the attempt coming at all. It wasn't, I mean, I had not been exposed to suicide really. You heard about it on TV or something like that, but I didn't have anybody that I knew in real life that had ever done that. And on your question about what to look for, like I said, the biggest red flag to me was that her personality totally changed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it wasn't just, oh, I'm going to try this thing to see if I can be more popular. It was a total personality shift.
Yes.
Like she was not the same person that she was 6 months prior to that. And that's really what caught my attention. So you have a teenager, you have anybody really that is changing their behavior, is talking, more dark than they used to, and then the classic signs like they're giving things away or they're talking about how they don't want to be here anymore. Yeah. You need to recognize that and explore that. But she really, like I said, she did not indicate that she didn't want to be here anymore. And then she made the attempt. And so when I questioned her about, wait a minute, what just happened? She told me that she heard of some other kid that she knew that had died by suicide and that she wanted to try it. And like I said, we explored that to figure out, well, why would she even want to try that? And so I got her therapy. She went on medication. At that time, I was the type of person that went, well, how do we take care of this? And if this is what the experts are telling me to do, that's what I'm going to do. So they said, therapy, medication. Medication seemed to help her initially. I saw part of that spark back, and then all of a sudden she was back to not being as dark, but she was back to like creating this alternate life for herself. She was telling people that she had a record deal in Seattle, and just very strange, off the wall. So I got her in therapy, and in Washington State, if you're over the age of 14, you have your own rights to where you can tell your therapist not to tell your parent what you talked about. So, I'm at a loss to say what she told her therapist or didn't tell her therapist. But, she was still, she was also doing the teenage things too. She was skipping school, and she would lie about where she was going. And then I'd find out later that she was somewhere else, and then she'd get grounded. And so I was constantly trying to keep on top of what was going on in the midst of this chaos that I had no control over. It was just very sad, really, to watch her spiral and know that she needs help, but not getting her effective help. Yeah, it was just hard.
Yeah, I can really completely relate. I know it's totally different to people, and your daughter is young and she's a girl. With my brother, I almost had the same experience. Isn't it very crazy that how our society is so illiterate, including some of the doctors too? Because when I was trying to help my brother, first of all, my family denied completely what was going on. Same thing, he was very cheerful, as you said, walking and taking the whole space in the room, being just center of the company. He was like that too, and people know, and I'm his friends know him being cheerful, being such a giving and open, and he loved karaoke and all that. He was very creative and very fun to be around. He had a wonderful sense of humor, and then suddenly he also became very closed up, and a few months before even his passing, he did not want to get up from bed, and then later I found out he was even crying, which is not normal for him. It's not him. And he's a grown man. And then the doctors would say to me that I'm being too much, because I'm trying to find out how we can help him more. So I'd contact the doctors from here, from Canada. And they wanted me to leave him alone. They would say, I'm being helicoptering him, right? And I'm but I believe we need to do that. I should have done even more. I should have just flew there myself and be there for several months. And that's what I regret about, but I did not do that. I was thinking I'm from here helping, I was sending some money to help because he could not work. But then my parents, I think, shamed him more by saying that you need to work. If you work, you will forget about it and how it will help you. When people say those wrong things, that you need to move on, like you need to go and find something to do, like for your daughter, they would say like, "Oh, I would grow this." For my brother, they would say, "Go find something to do, go get a job." He was working all his life as an oil and gas engineer. He used to make good money, and then suddenly he's not capable to work. And also when he got on the medication, that antidepressants, don't they have one of the number one side effect is suicide?
For some of those, yeah.
Yeah, some of those, yeah.
Why they have the black box warning on them.
So what is this campaign about, like suicide prevention? Does it really help?
I think it does. I mean, of the billions of people we have in the world, we're not losing more than we are. Meaning, in the United States, we're roughly around 50,000 people annually out of, 3 billion people. That's a small amount. So we help in some sense, but I think we could do better. I think that, we need to look at more parts of the problem. We need to look at upstream prevention. We need to look at our social structures like homelessness and drug abuse, and we need studies of people who are homeless. Why are they homeless? We do a lot of assumptions, in this country about why people do what they do. But I think we don't spend a lot of time asking the person why. I'd like to tell people that with suicide loss, there is a high percentage of people that if they don't get grief support right after the loss, that they can go on and, die by suicide as well. Well, I would like to see a study done of our homeless population or our drug addicted populations. How many of those are due to not getting help with their grief after a suicide loss?
Yes.
It's not, kind of like with your brother. You can't just say, oh, just go get a job. Oh, just go, make a living and buy a house. It's not that simple. If you're in the middle of grief, it is not that simple at all. If you're in the middle of depression, it is not that simple to just go do that.
No.
So I think prevention is good in a sense that it brings awareness. I think for some people, prevention just isn't working. I'm not a doctor, so I can't, speak to biologically how people are affected by different stressors. It's kind of a loaded question because we don't want to say prevention is that we don't need it, because we do. Mm-hmm. And there's lots of people doing really great work to bring awareness to the subject of suicide and prevention. But we're missing something. We're missing something.
Exactly.
Personally, I believe there's a biological component we aren't looking at. We don't look at any medical issues that might be going on in the brain. We're taking the word of somebody who's struggling to tell us how to fix them. Well, if they knew how to fix themselves, they wouldn't be going to the doctor in the first place. So I think there's a lot of medical issues with the brain. It could be injury. It could be concussion related. It could be has a tumor or something. We're not looking at any of that in the suicide prevention field, and which I think we need to. So that's my message. 2025, probably 2026, is let's start looking at the medical model of what is causing someone to have stress and think that suicide is the only option for them.
When I sent my brother to my friend who's a doctor, he's telling her, that's what I want to do. This is my plan. How do I know this? Because my mother was there and I asked her to record for me because I'm here in Canada. I need to know. My mother would never tell me the truth. So I asked her, I need to hear what's going on there. So she did that for me. And he tells her, like, here's what I want to do. That's how I want to take my life. And the doctor knows that's what's going on. And she understands she has clinical depression. She does give the medication. She asks this mother who doesn't believe in his depression, in his mental state, watch for him because he might want to do something because of this medication, the way it worked, right? After his passing, I thought, why didn't you take him to the hospital and do more testing in depth and send him to the specialists who are in that area? You could have saved his life, but it did not happen. He was sent home. And there was an attempt as well, just a couple days before he actually did the real thing. So when it didn't happen, like he did text me that he wants to take his life. I reached out to his friends, I reached out to the family. Only one his friend was able to get hold of him, and he was able to talk with him for 2 hours, made him go to bed and sleep. Next day he came back home because he was somewhere else, rented a place for that night. And then I was hoping now everybody understands. Now everybody will show up at his door and tell him how much he needed, how much they love him. They made him feel even worse because he felt now he's made himself even more, fun of, that everybody's laughing at him or not taking him seriously or he's weak. I don't know what his thoughts were, but I'm sure that's what he would have thought. Nobody showed up. Nobody phoned him. Maybe they wanted to leave him alone. I don't know. But nobody came to his door, and then on Sunday he was gone. It's very sad how the support is absent. We don't have the proper support.
I think there's a lot of different reasons. I think there's a lot of fear. I think fear comes because of the stigma. So like in the case of your brother, you could have had people saying, I don't know what to say to him. I'm scared to say the wrong thing, therefore I'm not going to call him at all. You could have had people who said, he has other friends that are probably better at talking to him about this, so I'm going to let them do it, and I'm going to back off. And then if you have a bunch of people that are all thinking that, then nobody goes to talk to them, right? So, that's one of the other things we have to really work on is combating fear of just the word suicide itself. The more that everybody can understand or get trained about how do you support your friend who is expressing.
Yes. Or family member, right? How to support. Because there are also stories where people say they are alive because of their family, because of the love of their family. I know some of those stories too. And I'm like, I wish it was my story too, like with my brother, right? When he was supported and surrounded with loving people who would really get him, understand what is going on.
You can't get into the head of the person themselves. So, I've seen people that the person who passed away had the loving family and everybody was there and everybody was checking on them. They still chose to leave because the pain, the self-imposed pain that the person is feeling can be so great that they're convinced that this is the right thing to do. They're convinced that person telling them all the good things might be lying. They're not worthy of what these people are saying that are nice things. There's all kinds of self-imposed perceptions. And, at the end of the day, we still don't know. We can't know what someone is thinking right at the time that they choose to end their life. Common sense certainly says if you know someone's struggling, reach out and talk to them. But then it's really hard if that person dies anyway because, it's what did we miss? But we thought we were doing good by talking to them. Well, you were, but you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what that person is thinking. I talk to a lot of parents that have lost their children, and they'll say, but I should have known that this is what my child wanted to do. And, I was guilty of that myself. As a parent, I was convinced that this is my child and I was supposed to be there for her. And, she made this choice, and what did I miss and what didn't I do? And then I heard a great talk by someone who said, well, as a child, as a teenager, as just a human being, if you're going to go do something that you don't want other people to know about, do you tell them ahead of time? I mean, if you're a child and you're going to skip school that day, do you get up in the morning and tell your parents, hey, I'm going to skip school today? Yeah, I'll see you later. Well, no. If you're going to go out and party with your friends and you're not supposed to, you're not going to tell your parents about it. So how is, disclosing your choice to end your life really any different? If they don't want to tell you, they don't tell you, and you don't know that this was going to happen. So really, like I said, all we can really do is an upstream prevention type of situation where if we know somebody is struggling with something in their life, be it, divorce, be it, anything, we know that's happening. Let's help them through that. And that might be enough to turn whatever's going on in their mind around. And again, looking at the biological side and the medical medical side of, are they low on dopamine? Are they low on serotonin? Do they
Exactly.
not have enough, vitamin D?
Vitamin, yeah, exactly. Or vitamin D, vitamin B, right? So, yeah.
Right.
I agree about that. I was also wondering about that after my brother's passing, that we should have checked his vitamin intakes and more, like, take it more seriously.
That's what happened with Chelsea. When Chelsea passed, they did her autopsy and they checked everything out. As far as what was going on with her body. So she was not on any substances. Her antidepressant that we thought she had been taking for the past 6 months was not in her system at all. So she was flushing them, she was throwing them away. We thought she was ingesting them. And she wasn't. So I don't know if that would have helped her, if she actually took I don't know. She was down to, I want to say it was like 104 pounds, and probably a good healthy weight for her with her size and everything. Her height was probably about 120, 115, 120. So she was down a good 10, 15 pounds below what she should have been. And that all makes a difference, in your body chemistry. Yes. and all of that. So yeah, I agree. I mean, what the body ingests and how that affects your thought processes and your stressors. I mean, it just all comes into play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for my brother was like more gaining weight. He was way bigger than he was supposed to be, and that's another sign too. People should realize depression works in a way that you either lose weight so much or you gain so much. Then that was same with me. Like when I am not feeling well, I do gain weight. So that's also another sign that people should realize something is going on. Something's changing. Your body is speaking for you, telling a story, and we need to pay attention to that. You're right. Can you please take us back to the moment when your world kind of shifted? What do you remember about those first hours and days? I know it's very heavy. Again, like if you don't want to talk about things, we can always cut this off.
Well, when we lost her, we were at the hospital. There was a lot of people moving around, people checking on me, that kind of thing. I didn't sleep for the first probably 2 days, I want to say. Because I'm the type of person that I have to just put myself into something. I have to focus on anything other than what's going on. And so just self-survival mode, I jumped into, okay, what do I need to do? What needs to get done? Who do I need to call? Who do I need to, I got to call my boss and let her know I'm going to be off work. And then final thing that I had to do in that 48-hour period was I had to tell her brother about what happened. That was probably the hardest of those 48 hours because he wasn't there. He was spending the night with his friend when she died. And so he didn't know. And, I had to go over there and tell him what happened. And then of course, tons of phone calls because one person finds out and they tell somebody else and it just starts going through the community. So I had to talk to the school. I had to talk to her friends and of course, everybody calling me saying, hey, I just heard this, that it happened. I just heard this. What do you need? What can I do? And so it was pretty overwhelming. I mean, I think I was on the third or fourth day afterwards, and I just handed my phone to somebody. And I said, I can't answer this phone anymore. And so, I was in a fog, obviously, very upset, and just kind of floating. I just felt like I was floating. Yeah. Like, what do I do now? Where do I go from here? I broke down. The staff at the hospital, I think, was trying to figure out what was wrong with me because I'm not one that will just like instantly break down when something happens. And so even though I got to the hospital, even though I knew the outcome really wasn't going to be good, when they told me that she was gone, I didn't lose it. I was surrounded by nurses who were just staring at me, waiting. Like they're just waiting for it to happen. And it didn't happen. It didn't happen until I went through. So when I was at the hospital, it was like 1 a.m. So I went through that whole evening. I went through the whole next day. I went through that evening the next day. And I was by myself, which, may not have been the best idea, in retrospect. But I was by myself. And I finally fell asleep because I was just exhausted physically, emotionally, all of it. And I woke up that next morning and realized that, oh my gosh, right, she's gone.
Yeah.
And I just lost it. I probably cried, stopped for a good half hour, 45 minutes, and then went, this isn't good. I probably shouldn't be here by myself. And so it was like 7 a.m, and I'm calling some friends. I'm like, can you just come over? Because I shouldn't be here by myself. And I had a friend that jumped in her car and came right over and just sat with me, and it was great. But I mean, that first week was just so busy with life insurance companies and funeral homes and family and friends, and it really wasn't until probably the next week that everybody went home and I had to go back to work, and everybody went back, to their normal life, their normal routine, that then, it kind of started hitting me more of, well, what do I do now? And, how do I even begin to maneuver through this type of grief? It's bad enough to lose a child, but then you lose a child in the midst of, being questioned about, well, what did you do and what didn't you do and what should you have done differently, and all these stigmatizing questions. That's exhausting too. And as loss survivors, we're forced to create this brand new normal for ourselves. We don't know how to do it. We haven't done it before. So the best you can really do is find somebody else that's done it and gravitate to them and say, how do we even begin to, unpack this and try to move through it? How do we do that? I don't know if that answered your question, but it was very exhausting.
Yeah, I do understand you completely. There is no, I guess, like a roadmap, or there is no way to cope with this, right? For the grieving, especially child, right? Especially to suicide, right? So it's just. I do understand what you went through. That's the thing, like as you said, like the word even stigmatized so much. Even myself, like if somebody lost the same way, like before, I would not know what to do, right? Kind of thing. So that's why we're here now, to share this information, to express how people can be present for each other. Because would you agree that mental health, mental illness, like depression and other changes in our system, should be treated the same way as any illness? And people should realize, when you show up for somebody who is ill, that's how we should be showing up for somebody who is ill with mental things.
Yeah, I don't understand how for centuries, literally, we have managed to disassociate our brains from the rest of our body. If I break my arm tomorrow and I can't drive the car, I can't go grocery shopping, I break my leg, I can't get around, I have people that show up that say, okay, here, let me help you, let me get you to the doctor, let me get you to the grocery shop. And there's no question, you broke something in your body and people rally around you and help you. But when it comes to your brain or your psyche or whatever, as soon as you say, oh, I just don't want to get out of bed today, or, I'm thinking of dying or something, people run the other direction. Yes. And I don't understand it either. And then, if they don't run the other direction, then they'll judge you for thinking that way, feeling that way, or whatever. And we don't jump in and go, well, why are they feeling that way? And the person may not even understand why they feel that way. They just feel it. But they're not getting the help they need. So I don't understand why we take mental illness or just mental irregularities and kind of shame the person because it's happening.
But it does happen. With my brother being successful, as I said, like a oil and gas engineer, having his career, being just a young man, people even told me, like, what was wrong, like why he was unhappy with his life. He had everything in his world he wanted to have. They don't understand there's so much behind that. If so many people want to live his life, kind of thing, right? Travel and have money. So what was wrong? But that's why, even then, you should be wondering why he doesn't want to leave, right?
Right.
Because
the perception we have about other people very rarely match up to what the person thinks about themselves.
Yeah.
While others may say, oh, he has all these things and he has notoriety or he has popularity. Why would he, be sad or upset or or suicidal or what have you. Same with Chelsea. Oh my goodness, Chelsea's so vibrant and she has all these friends and she has all these talents. Why would she be upset? And at the end of the day, they were struggling with this thing going mentally with them.
Yeah.
But again, is it behavioral? Is it medical? Is it a combination of both? We don't ask enough of the questions, in my opinion.
True.
I think we need to do better because I think the concept or the definition of mental illness to begin with causes the problem because we compare mental illness with somebody being deficient and not, normal, right? We just say they have a moment. If we were to say people have momentary, illnesses that are affecting their brain, that would sound much better than to say that person's mentally ill.
Mm-hmm.
So if we just said this person has, a temporary, because it could be temporary.
Yes, exactly.
If you find the thing that's going to help them, they have a temporary illness going on that's affecting their brain. Just like it might affect your arm, might affect your foot, it just happens to be affecting your brain. Mm-hmm. Okay, what do we have for that? What medication do we have for that? What surgery do we have for that? What do we have, right?
Exactly.
We don't go far enough to explore that. Mm-hmm. And, I think until we get to that point, that kind of goes back to answer your question of, is prevention really working? I think until we are asking the question of what is making somebody temporarily sad, is it fixable? How do we fix that? That's really how we steer suicide prevention in the right direction.
Yes,
because
I
we have
agree
to look
with
at
you.
the brain and the body as a whole, not here's our body and we fix all these things that's wrong with it, and here's our head with our brain over here, and that's a whole different thing. No, we're all connected, right? All these body parts are connected and they all intersect with each other. I watched a really great video a few years ago by a doctor who said that we don't treat the brain the same way that we treat the body. That if we have an injury in the body, we go get an x-ray or we go get an MRI or whatever it's needed. But you have a person with an issue with their brain, we just say, okay, what psychotic medication and what therapy should we try with them? And how many, we may try 2 or 3 until one works. That's how we handle the brain. And it's like, no, they're all connected. We have no problem going to the dentist. The dentist does an x-ray and finds out what's going on in our mouth. But somehow we get up to the brain part and we're not talking about that as a medical condition. We're always looking at it as the behavioral condition. Will our behavior be influenced by medical issues that may be going on in our body, like I said before? And, as you can see, I get passionate.
Yes, you know what? I really appreciate you saying those things because I do agree with you 100%. Me too. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not a psychologist or anything like that. But I see there's this connect for sure. There should be a connection. As you said, because when somebody mentions about the depression or the mental states, then for some reason think, oh, this is final. This is not possible to do anything about it. But you're right. What if we treat it as a temporary thing, temporary condition, and we can make it so much better for so many people, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, with my grief, that because I lost a sibling, although in my case, I treated him as my firstborn child because I did raise him. He was like my firstborn son to me. But still, because he's my sibling, people would say to me, he's just your sibling kind of thing. It was so heavy for me. When I came back from funeral, I never received any meal, nothing. So the same day I found out, at night I flew. I got my last minute ticket and only there's few people from my life group, they showed up and I was gone to funeral for a week. I came back, we were gonna go on vacation that day. So I said my family, you just go ahead, I'll be fine. I asked somebody from church to meet me at the airport. So all they did, meet me at the airport and I come to an empty home. No food, nothing. I had to ask my neighbor if they had some milk because I had nothing, no milk, nothing in my house because my family was gone, my kids. So I wanted them to have that time away, right? I wanted them to have that vacation. That's just sad how people don't understand. I was a complete mess, just crying day and night, and people would expect you to be over it in a couple of months, right? Or a couple of weeks. How was it for you? You did mention already it was very heavy for you, but also you in one of your podcasts, I've heard you said you experienced the silence so much. That's what I'm sharing. I felt suddenly left alone, and suddenly, as I said, wasn't even brought any meal for me. That's how people don't understand. They don't believe something so excruciating, so painful. And I was left alone. And the psychologists who wrote books, they say that the risk amongst survivors suicide is huge. I could have committed suicide in my own home when my kids are away, when nobody's here, and I'm in a complete devastated state. And I did have several times wanting to take my life, and nobody understands that. They just do not get it. To this day, when I'm speaking about it, I'm sure I'm judged by those people, thinking, what is she doing? She's now talking about it.
Well, I'm pretty sure that because I've been doing this a while now, I'm sure there's many people out there at this point, friends, family, they're like, can't you just stop? Can't you just go on and not talk about Chelsea and whatnot, anymore? But like you said, it's important. How do we know that one person listening to this episode of your podcast isn't going to be sitting there going, oh my gosh, I'm not alone? Because it's very isolating. You feel very alone. You feel that nobody understands. You feel that there's no end in sight to this grief, that it can't get any better, which, it will. The longer you push through this and you get your support, whatever that looks like for you, it gets softer. It doesn't go away. You don't forget them. You don't just put it away and never think about it again. That's not biologically, humanly possible. But, like for Chelsea, I don't wake up and think about her every waking moment of the day. Now, granted, I work in this field, so I have to talk about Chelsea a lot. But things will happen. Little things have happened along the way where I think it was probably 9 years after I lost Chelsea. I was coming up on the anniversary date of her death. And typically I would be days in advance going, okay, it's coming. I'm going to be upset, all of that. And all of a sudden I was within 2 days of it and didn't even realize that was the date on the calendar and this was coming. So in one moment I was like, oh my goodness, I've made some progress. This is great. And then the next minute I was crying because I thought, now I'm a horrible mother because, I'm not on the floor crying and I'd forgotten about the date. So it's such a daunting journey. And like I said, it can be very isolating.
Yes.
And right now, we're coming up in December, it's going to be the 19th anniversary. So Chelsea will have been gone 19 years, which is just unbelievable to me that we're that far. And I look back over the last 18, 19 years and I say, okay, how much have we progressed in the field on how we support our loss survivors? And I'm very sad to say I don't think we've made a lot of progress, which is very irritating and very sad, and I get really angry about it. And again, it's the stigma, it's all the stuff. What I found was if I didn't have people around me, then I wanted resources, right? I wanted to have things to read or something to watch on video to understand what's even happening. And I couldn't find anything. I found one support group. 2 years later, I found another support group. I found a couple books, but it's very, as you know, when you're in the fog and you're depressed and you're just trying to get out of bed and find food and brush your teeth, to give you a book that's this thick with little small print, it doesn't help. Those books are great. I know many different authors that have written really great books, but at the time that you've just lost somebody, you don't have the capacity mentally and emotionally to start reading a book. And so as time went on, I thought I'm going to have to create some resources because we don't have it. What I found was, even now, there are so many really great resources out there for loss survivors. For whatever reason, the loss survivors can never seem to find them. I don't know what it is. So maybe we're not talking about these resources enough so that people can find them that need them. Maybe we don't think loss survivors actually need resources. I don't know what the problem is. But, I created a book that's out on Amazon that, it's 35 pages, double spaced, larger print, So really, if you condensed it all down, you could probably make like 2 pages out of it. But it was, somebody told me our loss survivors need something written at about a 3rd grade level, because that's about what you're taking in information and cognitively understanding.
So true, so true.
And so I did. I wrote this book, and I've gotten really great reviews on it because it was at a level that a new loss survivor could understand it. And so we need more stuff like that.
What is the name of the book?
So it's called The New World of Suicide Loss. It's out on Amazon. So in there I just say, here's what your world looks like right now. Basically, I confirm that maybe you're not sleeping, maybe you're not eating, you're sad, you're trying to, and basically the underlying message to the whole thing is this is all normal, because loss survivors think that there's something wrong with them because of how they're feeling or not functioning. And I'm here to tell them that this is all normal behavior. This is what we would expect you to feel like or act like, because this person that you in your world just died by suicide, probably without warning. So that's the premise of the book, is this is normal, and here's maybe some things that you haven't experienced yet. So when they come up, you'll know that those are normal too.
Yeah.
And then I created a YouTube channel, put some content on the YouTube channel, because what I found is you might like to read a book, somebody else might be like, I don't want to read, I just want to watch video. Or like we have our podcasts, right? Because maybe somebody just needs to hear it, have their eyes shut, and not look at anything. But again, it's not getting out to all the people that need it right away.
Yeah. So you're saying that we need more resources. Yeah, I agree with you. As you said, like when we feel so inadequate, like especially because we've been judged by others. I'm also a mother of 2. I was told many times, like, oh, you have children, you focus to that. And when you are a complete mess, like as you say, like it was for me to get out of bed was a miracle. I did not want anything. Like I just, and I would cry 24/7. I was overwhelmed with guilt, all those things. And also, as you mentioned in one of your podcasts about PTSD is a real thing. Yes, it is. My focus and my concentration and my memories kind of came back to me. But for most of it, like I could not even remember my brother or memories with him. And it was scary. People would say to me, think about good things, good memories. And I could not remember. Like my memory was completely erased. I made a choice and decision. I need to get better for my kids. I had to get up and be present. Slowly, I would take different steps of healing myself. I had to do what I needed to do for me. And I was looking to different ways of healing. One of the professors and psychologists wrote a book about the wilderness of suicide grief. And he even had like your rights. And that really helped me to see that I have a right to grieve. And I have a right to cry. I have a right to be in this moment who I am now and accept it. It's so important to hear for people. And what you've published, I think it's important for people to know, like, yes, nothing is wrong with me. I'm going through the process.
Well, and I think what people fail to understand is, yes, we lose people by death all the time. We lose parents, we lose pets, we lose, things that are important to us. And we grieve those things, and it's all valid grief. When you talk about suicide, there's so much complexity that comes along with that. So it's not just we lost this person. We've lost a sense of ourselves. We have lost just understanding of how the world works. You go through life as a person believing, a certain structure of, I'm going to go to school and I'm going to grow up and I'm going to be this profession and I'm going to have kids and families. And so we have this idea in our head of what life is. And then something like a suicide loss comes along and it turns that all upside down. You end up questioning everything you ever believed. It's just it's so convoluted. And so it's hard then when we lose someone to suicide and somebody says, well, you'll get over it, just, or aren't you over it yet? I don't like that one either. Yeah. People fail to understand the complexity of suicide and how that aspect of death makes just, normal loss so different. And it's about education, right? It's educating people. We have 135 people on average are affected by one loss. And every time I tell somebody that statistic, they kind of look at me like, you're kidding. And it's like, no, we have scientific proof. I have data. 135 people on average are affected by one suicide loss. If you lose 50,000 people in a community in a year, you multiply that, 6.7 million million people are affected in some way. They may just have known the person that died and it really doesn't affect their day-to-day life, or you lived with that person, or you were married to that person, you gave birth to that person, and now they've died by suicide. It turns your whole world upside down. And then that goes out and affects everything around that person, their work, their other relationships, their relationships with their family, their plans for the future. Yeah, I mean, it's just... It's something we just really need to be educating the world about and not be afraid of the topic. We have to stop being afraid of the topic. And we need to find out and figure out why people are dying by suicide, the real reasons, not the assumed reasons. And then we need to find the ways to stop it.
And it does affect so many people. I agree with you, because my brother's friends and co-workers and his close friends and us, family, everybody was affected so much. I've received so many phone calls, messages from his different friends, from his classmates from university. They were devastated.
Like when Chelsea died, I knew, like I said, she had a lot of friends at school. So I knew she had a lot of friends that were upset. And I thought I needed to have a memorial service for her that people could come and pay their respects. I told the principal of her school date and time this was going to happen. I figured maybe 20 to 30 people might show up, give or take. I had somebody tabulating for me. I was told we had over 300 people come to where we filled the sanctuary space and people were trickled out into the hallway because they couldn't get a seat. Clear out to the doors, all because they all had a fond memory of this relationship with my daughter. And some of these people I'd known before Chelsea was even born. They came to support me. And so you really don't realize how many people yourself, affect until something like that happens.
It was actually more than 135 people.
Her elementary school or kindergarten teacher came. Somebody that worked at her daycare when she was 10 years earlier, they came, because they saw her obituary in the paper, so they knew, what had happened. And just all these people. I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize that we knew this many people.
She was loved. She was deeply loved by so many people.
What's sad about it is she didn't realize it. That's the issue with the whole thing, is if she'd have realized that 300 plus people are going to show up if you're not here anymore, I don't know if that would have changed her mind or not, but I would like to think that just knowing how many people we affect and how many people would be affected by us not being here, I would like to think that would make a difference too.
We have a different ways of funerals in back home, but they do throughout the year actually come. But then there's special dates when they do memorials. So when I was back here in Canada, I realized they don't do the same thing. So I did organize my own memorial lunch. Invited people. Of course, there were people who reached out saying that they don't feel comfortable coming. They didn't come. There was a very close friend who I wanted to see, but she said she just doesn't like to talk about grief. I think she did not grieve her own griefs properly. And then she's the one also who would tell me, like, can you please stop sharing about it and talking about it? People here in Canada know us as a family, don't know my brother, right? And still about 45, 47, I believe, people showed up. It was more for me, right? Because and then I read later this book, The Wilderness of Suicide Grief, and he mentions you can create a memorial and say goodbye as many times as you want to. If you feel like you haven't said goodbye properly, and then I also gathered, because he passed 3 months before his 35th birthday. So in November was his 35th birthday, and I again invite people. People don't understand that kind of thing, but every year I try to have cake, dinner for us, and in memory of Armand, my brother.
That's great. I do too. Every year I at least get a birthday cake. Sometimes I might be the only one eating it, and that's okay. But we, as a society, we need to quit judging people about how they grieve or who they lost, because it's not helping. All you're doing is making the person feel worse than they already do, thinking they're doing it wrong. And there's no wrong way to grieve the person that you love. Now, I will say, if you have somebody who's grieving and they cannot progress further in their own life, meaning they can't go back to work ever, or they're so focused on the loss that they can't enjoy anything else in life. Then we need to fix that if that's happening. But if you have someone who, like with Chelsea, like I said, I do a birthday cake every year. I'm on social media when it's her birthday. I'm on social media at her anniversary date. I'm on social media if I come across some photo that I haven't seen in 10 years and I go, oh my gosh, look at this picture. This is hilarious, whatever she was doing. And I share that. And I'm sure, like I said, I'm sure there's people out there that are saying, God, could she just get over this?
Yes.
Your daughter's been gone this long. But, don't judge what I do. Don't judge what another person does and how they grieve who they lost. Because that's their family. That's their loved one.
Yeah.
And, we're not here to judge other people anyway. It's not nice.
Yeah.
But, like when Chelsea would have had her 21st birthday, a bunch of us went out and we went to a show because I found a show that she would have probably absolutely loved attending. And I said, let's just all go. So we went, we had dinner, we watched the show, all in her memory. Even like the community walks. I don't know if they do community walks up in Canada, but down here in the States, they do community walks where a bunch of people that advocate for suicide prevention or have lost people go out and, in their loved one's memory, they walk 5-10 miles, whatever it is. People don't get judged for that, but that's a way of memorializing the person that's gone. So, we need to stop judging people. We need to understand what people are really feeling. We need to make people feel safe because what happens is when you start judging people about how they grieve, eventually they don't feel safe sharing what's going on with them. And they close up and then they have to go to private support group meetings and whatnot because that's the only place they can talk because that's where they feel safe. Let's, stop judging people and stop making people feel unsafe. I think too, that will go a long way.
We celebrate and we remember our loved ones. They're not forgotten and our love lives forever. Remembering their birthday, remembering them. Even around Christmas, we created this beautiful tradition now because my brother's birthday is 21st of November. So now every year on 21st of November, we put up our Christmas tree. That's my way of also remembering him and including him in our tradition family with my kids. I know it's hard for you and I've heard other stories too and it's heavy for you, the holidays. But it's just saying like creating something little like that, little tradition, and being on social media, me too, like I every year post something about his anniversaries. And I have a friend, Betty, who's lost her son also to suicide. Every year, her and her husband, they have a cake as well, and they have balloons that they let fly in the air. I think it's beautiful, and they always post that on their social media too. It's important. It's important to us, and people need to respect that, and we need to respect each other about that it's important. So you made this major change in your life from working as an accountant and then becoming a grief coach. Maybe you can share about what led you there. What was it like to step into this purpose, like how it happened in your life?
Well, like I said, I'd gone through a couple of peer support groups, and I found one support group that just was fantastic. I resonated with the people who were there. We were able to form, long-term friendships. But it was what they call an open group. So people could come in 1 week and then not come the next week. And maybe they come for 2 weeks and then maybe they don't come again ever. And so as new people were coming in and out, I was hearing these stories that people didn't understand them and people were shaming them. And we had kind of a rule within the group that if we saw somebody from the group out in public at the grocery store or whatever, we couldn't acknowledge that we knew them from the group. And I thought it was wrong. I thought it just really made me angry. And that kind of propelled me to say, we need to be talking more about grief support for suicide loss. We need to be telling, basically everything we've already talked about here on this episode. We need to be telling what people are going through. Because these people need support. And we're not supporting our loss survivors. They're hiding in basements at support groups, and they're hiding in their houses after they get home at night and crying for hours before they go to bed. And nobody knows this. And so that, like I said, led me to want to just tell people more, about it. I went back to school. I got my bachelor's degree in psychology because I wanted to understand why her mental health treatment progressed the way it did. And I thought I would find some answers there. What I found ultimately through going back to college was our behavioral health students, they don't talk about suicide. So you have a whole, demographic of people that are behavioral health students, graduates, are going to ultimately help someday, and they're not getting any training on what suicide loss looks like. And coupled with sitting in support groups and hearing loss survivors say they went to get therapy and the therapist didn't understand what they were going through, made them angry, and they say, I'm never going back to therapy again.
Same with me. Happened that to me too.
So it's a problem, right? As I got my educational degree, talking to more people and speaking in front of people, COVID happened. So we had the COVID lockdown. That forced me onto the internet to then find more people that were working in the field. So I made some really great connections nationwide. Those connections led to meeting more influential people, and I ended up on the board of the American Association of Suicidology for a year to try to, enact more policies that would help loss survivors. Went back to school again, got my master's in psychology. That master's program had an emphasis in life coaching because I said, well, what we have is we have a system where, you lose someone to suicide. You want to get grief support. You find a therapist. It may be a good therapist. It may be a therapist that needs more training. You don't know. And so you go for therapy, but then the therapist is so overbooked with appointments that you may not be able to get back in for your next appointment for 2 to 3 weeks. So you have all that time in between appointments that you're grieving and you're not sleeping and you're not eating and you're trying to go to work and all this stuff. And so I thought, okay, where can we fill in the gaps? I thought, well, why can't we take life coaching on some structure and make that available to fill in the gaps between therapy, or just, as therapy in itself, because they couldn't find a therapist. What I found was there's a big negative connotation around life coaching in that people look at life coaching and think, oh, it's to lose weight or it's to do my job better or whatever. Well, in going through my degree, what I found was life coaching comes out of the field of positive psychology. So it is psychology based. And there's a lot of helpful tools in there that by coaching someone into understanding all the things that we go through on a daily basis and understanding what's out there beyond that really tough grief, is going to be helpful for people. So I started creating curriculum on how to coach loss survivors. And then I started a company called Journey Through Grief that supports loss survivors. Then I started a company called Postvention Collective that goes out and does the training to the students that need to understand what suicide grief looks like. That's kind of where I'm at now. And then next year, I'm going to have a couple conferences here in the United States for loss survivors and for behavioral health workers and so there's a lot going on. And I have a lot of conversations with a lot of different people. I voiced my concern that we're really not advancing our ability to help our loss survivors any more than we did 20, 30, 40 years ago. And the answer always seems to be, we have to create more resources. And what I found when I was locked down with COVID and forced onto the internet full time, what I found was we have thousands, if not millions, of actual resources, valid, really good resources to help loss survivors, but the loss survivors aren't getting them. They can't find them, or they find a couple of them. And so, my focus now is how do we bridge between the resources and the people that need them? I don't think we need to create more resources. I really don't. I can put my hands on many resources instantaneously. But the loss survivor, the person who loses somebody to suicide tomorrow, they're limited on where they go to find this stuff. So I tell people, you know what, let's, and even for all your listeners, right? Go rent a billboard on a highway and get something up on a billboard of where somebody can find help if they're struggling, or where people can find help if they need grief support. Or put the 988 number up there, because that's our best resource right now. Granted, I've heard some challenging stories with 988 because it happens in any system, but we can fix that if we know about it. Put stuff up where people will readily see where to find these resources. And then we're helping all kinds of people that way. So that's kind of where I'm at, is just continuing to tell people, quit being scared of the word suicide, quit judging people for how they grieve, and talk to people to find out what they're struggling with. And if they tell you what they're struggling with and that seems weird to you, that's still their truth, right? That's still what they think is wrong with them. Help them through it.
Yeah. Would you say 988 works in Canada as well?
988's in Canada, yes.
Yeah, as well? Okay. Besides 988, like how people can find those resources?
There's resources on my site. Honestly, I would have to look up specifically Canadian ones. Okay, I'm not well versed on Canadian ones. I know you have a couple grief coaches up in Canada that do take clients. And I can send you the list, and then you can tag it on to show notes. Like down here in America, we have the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention. They have loss support materials. We have the American Association of Suicidology. They have loss support resources. There's a website called Alliance for Hope, and they work specifically with loss survivors. I will send you the information on all those, and you can attach that as well. But the internet's so vast now. You can Google, right? Loss survivor resources.
Yes.
Or send me an email.
Yeah, thank you. But also, because what we discussed today, even like when somebody is at a crisis, they cannot be like sitting there and searching for information and stuff, right? So the maximum I could do is accept the offer to go and see a therapist at some point of my
Well, like I said, start with 988, because 988 should have the resources that's available. Or you can call 211. Down in America, you can call 211 for your community, and they give you the community resources they have.
Yeah, they have 311 for Calgary, specifically city number as well. I'm sure they have information as well. What I'm saying is that how about we also educate each other, like educate our community, our people, how to be present, how to be supportive, non-judgmental, non-critical, right? But actually being present, especially churches. Like I found even people in churches don't know how to grieve anymore. I know they offer some courses. I went to one of the courses at the church, but I think like people who are our neighbors, our colleagues, co-workers, our friends, we share more about how they can be supportive of each other. That's, I think, is important.
Well, like you said, when you got home, you had no food and nobody had brought anything, right? I think somehow we have the misconception that people are grieving for like the first week or the first 10 days, and then they're okay. If you know somebody that's lost somebody, even if it's not suicide, right? Maybe they just lost their spouse or something. 2 weeks, a month, 2 months, check in on them.
Exactly.
Check in on them. Make sure they're eating. See if they need some help, getting their laundry done. See if they need help watching the other kids, because the parents just need to go and have some time by themselves. Because like you said, you had your daughter that you still had to take care of, right? I had a 17-year-old. I couldn't parent. I felt guilty for, thank goodness he had his dad, because I couldn't function, right? I couldn't keep track of what he was doing, or none of that. So, but back to what you said, check on your neighbors, check on your coworkers, if you know that you have a coworker and you know that they just lost somebody in their family to suicide, but they're coming to work every day, right? And it looks like they're okay because they're getting their job done. I guarantee you, They're not okay.
No.
They're only getting their job done because their boss may have yelled at them that they are, working up
And they
to
have
the
to pay
level.
bills.
And you have to pay bills. Like I said, I had to go back to work a week after Chelsea died because I was a single mom, full breadwinner of the house, and I had no choice. Everything needed to get paid. Like I was saying earlier, I'd like a study done on our homeless population because we tend to just kind of, poo-poo our homeless population, at least here in the States. How many of those homeless people are homeless because they lost their child to suicide? They couldn't go back to work, or they went back to work but couldn't
function. They couldn't function,
couldn't function to the level you needed to, so you got fired. Okay, well, if you're not working or you get fired, you can't get work because you can't get out of bed. The bills don't get paid, and then you get evicted, lose your house or whatever. Okay. How many of our homeless population are in that particular situation? We don't know.
You could have helped them in the early stage, right? Yeah, exactly.
Sure, right. So, we go and we talk to different businesses and we say, that your employee, coworker just lost somebody to suicide, because I guarantee you HR had to know about it in order for the time off to get approved and all that. Check on them and don't expect them to be fully functional when they get back. It's just, it's unheard of that they can be fully functional like nothing happened. Now, like I said, if it's just somebody that they're an acquaintance with, they knew somebody that was a friend of a friend of a friend, yeah, they're probably okay. But I guarantee you that if you have a coworker or an employee who lost their spouse, who lost their sibling, who lost their child, or anybody that lived in their house that they were, in charge of, like a niece or a nephew or foster child or, whatever, they're not okay.
Okay.
They're not okay. They've come back to work. Maybe they were fortunate enough to have more than a week off. Maybe they had a month off, but they're not okay. And so you need to just check on them. But that doesn't mean, you don't get in their face and, hover and whatever, but just go up and maybe just give them a little side hug, or just say, I'm thinking of you today. Or if you need to talk, I'm here. And sometimes you may never hear back from that person, because sometimes just acknowledging that you are there if they need you is sufficient for them. But we can't expect that they have just come back from this life-altering experience and that they are okay. I don't care how much therapy they're in. I don't care how much grief support and how many other friends and family are rallying around them. They're not okay. So in the workplace, don't assume they're okay. I had a gentleman come through a support group who lost his brother, and he had worked, the brother that was still alive, he had worked for a company in town for about 20 years for the same company. So, they, have these friendships and relationships at work. And so he goes to his boss and says, my brother just died by suicide, any time off. So, graciously, they gave him, I want to say it was like a couple months probably off. So now he goes back to work, and his first day back, gets called into the boss's office with human resources there and said, we're so glad to have you back. We hope that you're doing better. We still feel really bad about your loss. All these really great things they said to him. But then they said, but you're back at work now. So we expect you to perform at the same level you always have. We won't be able to grant time off all the time. And you're back now. And he said some really choice words to them and quit right on the spot. Like I said, been there 20 plus years. He was only in his probably late 40s. So most of his adult life, he's been working for these people. And they said, no, but just keep in mind, we expect you to operate at the same level that you have been all the time you've been here. And he quit. He left. Had to go find new work, right? It's stuff like that. It's like you can't expect people to just bounce right back from this and be functional.
I think we people need to be more compassionate and gentle with each other.
Let's help each other get through the grief instead of judging people for what they're doing or not doing or feeling or not feeling.
And that can be on any level, right? Because grief can be also about losing a job, right? Going through divorce and losing a relationship or losing a pet, and also losing you lost your beautiful child, and then all the years that you could have been together, right? And watching her graduate and get married. It's just grief is so heavy and so deep. So now I'm glad you're now speaking about it. You're sharing and you're trying to make change in this world. Would you say that using your voice in all these different ways of being a speaker, a podcast host, publishing, creating your coaching, helping people find those resources, how has it helped you shape your own healing? Would you say it's helped you even more today?
Yeah, because like I said, the original goal was for people to understand that suicide grief exists and that people need help. I feel like I'm accomplishing that mission when I get feedback from people saying, oh, I listened to your podcast and I was able to take information from that. I had a mom reach out to me just this week and said, I had listened to your podcast and I'm going to try to go back to therapy again, because she quit therapy initially because of the same thing, where the therapist didn't understand what she was going through and couldn't help her. And so she just pushed against therapy for the last 3 years. But she's like, no, I listened to your podcast. I'm going to try it again. I like to think that it's helping people to get the messaging out. I mean, I figure God gave me this message and I'm sharing it to the world. I'm just a vessel to put the information out there. In the end, I just want to see people functional. I can't say people will be happy. I'd like to see people happy. But, I just want them functional. I just want them to be able to get up and have a semblance of their new normal, of their new life, without this person physically here. They're never, emotionally, they're not gone. Spiritually, they're not gone. I believe that, they're still hovering around, watching what we're doing. But it's just, I think putting the messaging out there has helped my own grieving along the way. I think it certainly helped maybe speed up my healing a little bit, just because, I firmly believe that people need to tell their story in some way, even if it's to themselves, even if it's just writing it in a book. It's important to get those stories, that message of how they're feeling out there. I would like to think that, I've created a place where people can feel safe doing that.
I appreciate that. I agree with you. We need to move from that isolated grief of feeling completely alone, to this collective action of being present for each other, supporting each other, and creating a community of compassionate support and the action that people can take. So thank you so much. You're doing something big, not only for ourselves today, but for our children, for the future generations to come. I'm glad it gives you hope and peace that things are going to be, the more of us we speak and sharing, the better world we are creating.
Every day when I get up, I wish Chelsea was still here. So, I have to be grateful for the fact that if she's not here, I'm able to take her story and share her story to the world, that maybe it will help somebody else.
Yes.
That's all I can do.
Yes. And that's what you're doing. It's wonderful. I'm glad you're doing it, because that's all we can offer this world, to share the light of our loved ones. And you're doing this work. You've been fueled by the love you have for your daughter. And that's what I'm doing. Same with my thing. Like I'm loving my brother, and I want to share his story, so it helps at least somebody, one person in this world. Thank you so much, Tracy. I truly, truly appreciate your honesty, courage, and the way you keep showing up every day in this world. Your voice really brings comfort and clarity and connection to those navigating through this very heavy, deep grief, especially those who lost somebody to suicide. And your daughter Chelsea's story lives on through the work you do like every day. And I'm so just grateful for this conversation. It matters so deeply for every parent, every survivor, and every person who's listening and need this to know that they should not feel alone. They should feel less alone. I want to thank you for being here today with me. Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you for the platform that you're putting out there as well, because I know it's not easy, and sharing your story isn't easy. You're making a difference as well.
Yeah. Today when I heard your story, feeling more brave.
I have to make sure you're taking care of yourself too, because it does take a toll on your own emotions and your own sense of self. And so put your own oxygen mask on first is what we tell everybody.
Yeah. So what do you do about that? How do you help yourself? How do you find that?
I'll take a couple days and I'll just shut down. I'll turn off the computer. I'll walk away from social media, find something that I can do outside, weather permitting. I like to plant my flowers and go walking. Last year I got into painting rocks. I never painted rocks before, but it just, it's a good way to just kind of, right, decompress.
Yeah.
I find that's important. I do a lot of journaling. I find that, I have to rebalance myself every now and then.
Mm-hmm. What kind of conference? You mentioned some conference going to happen soon.
Next year, August 2026, Journey Through Grief is going to have a loss survivor conference in Springfield, Missouri for 2 days. And, we just want all loss survivors from anywhere across the globe.
Maybe I will come too. Invite me, I'll come. Pardon?
I expect to see you there. We're going to have feeding everybody, breakfast, lunch, dinner. I'm going to have speakers come in. We're going to do arts and crafts and have tons of resources for people they can take back home with them. We've a lot of other loss survivors that they can meet. Maybe they'll make some long-term friendships with, with the idea being that you're not alone. Right? We want people to understand that they're not alone. And you don't want to talk to anybody and you want to sit in a corner by yourself and just watch, that's okay too. Nobody's going to be forced to do anything they don't want to do. But it's just about bringing awareness and just loving on everybody. And, I might have birthday cake. We'll see. Chelsea's birthday is in August.
I think you should have a cake. That's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's.
Yes, you should. Yeah, I would totally support you on that. Sorry, what?
Yeah, so that's kind of the consensus right now of everybody I've talked to is you have to have the cake.
You must have a cake. We want to celebrate Chelsea as a big group. Yeah, she missed so many birthdays.
I'm looking for a bakery in town that will bake the biggest cake that I can find.
Or maybe cupcakes, they can be cupcakes too, but it can be little cake for Chelsea.
The conference room will seat 700 people. So can you imagine if we had 700 loss survivors all coming together and as a group and realizing that they weren't alone and getting a cupcake?
Yes, why not? That's beautiful. Why didn't I remember in Chelsea, right? What did you say? What the date was her birthday? 8th?
So it's going to be the 14th and 15th of August.
Yeah. When is Chelsea's birthday?
The 6th.
The 6th, yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So she would have been 36 on that birthday. So we just need to have cake.
Yes, we need to have that. What helped me to survive also, because when I was doing different things, creativity like yourself, I started writing my poems and then I started drawing Neurographica. Neurographica is actually scientifically proven method by a Russian professor, psychologist. It does help also with depression and healing your traumas and creating a new reality kind of thing, transformational kind of therapy. It was helping me actually a lot, so I've been doing a lot of drawing like that. When you're creating new neuron connections in your brain, new neuron paths, and kind of healing through your traumas. And
what they found is when we lose somebody to suicide because of that trauma in our own brain, we have destroyed, obliterated all of these neural pathways in our head. So that's what's causing the brain fog. That's what's causing different emotions that we're having. And so now, after that initial loss and this damage, right, that's happened, now we're spending this time trying to repair all of these connections in our head, which is really fascinating when you're talking about the neuroscience of all of it. And so how we get grief support, how, the therapy we get, how we're treated, all goes into play in those neural pathways healing themselves. So if we have negative experiences with therapy or grief support of some sort, that's all going to play into rebuilding those pathways. And so if it doesn't heal correctly, you're going to have problems comes over time. So yeah, I mean, we really need to look at grief and how it, like, again, biologically affects us. We're trying to rebuild these neural pathways, and so when we're seeing content that is helpful, you know, maybe that's putting a neural pathway back together the right way, and then we just keep healing.
Yeah, I think you're a good writer. I really was enjoying your podcasts. I'm going to listen to them more. Thank you.
So over on Journey Through Grief's YouTube channel, when we were talking about the different relationships that, you know, get affected, I actually did a 5-part series on losing the relationship to suicide, because we talk about, you know, we lost our brother, we lost our daughter, we lost this person, but we didn't just lose that person, right? We lost the relationship that we had with that person. And so, you know, I have a dad that comes on, and we interviewed him, and he talks about losing his son and what little nuances of their relationship left when his son left. And so there's also one for a lady that lost her mother. There's one on there with a lady who lost her brother. So maybe you should go watch that. And it's just, you know, again, talking about, we're not just losing people, we're losing that relationship. We're losing the things that we can't do with them in the future, like marriages and babies and all. We can't experience any of that, those life moments. And yeah, I think that probably gets back into when we're supporting people at work, or we're supporting people that we know lost somebody. You have to remember, we didn't just lose a person. We lost that relationship, those things we used to like to do together, or eat together, you know, things like that.
And the future life with them too.
Every story has its own complex issues, right? I mean, and then we're stuck picking up the pieces after it's over and trying to navigate through the grief. And, you know, again, I mean, I commend you for coming on and trying to, you know, make a difference with your story. Because, you know, that's how we can help other people, is sharing the story and hoping some little part of it resonates with somebody, again, so they know they're not alone.
Yeah, that's the main reason, I think, for us to do this.
Let's stay connected, and whatever you need, let me know going forward. And yeah, it's been a pleasure to meet you over these last couple days, and you know, you're doing a great job. So keep, you know, doing what you're doing.
Thank you very much.